If you're raising a child with autism, you've probably experienced the confusion that comes with trying to make sense of it all. One expert says one thing, another says the opposite, and social media is full of opinions. Every week there's a new therapy, a new program, a new approach claiming to be the answer. And somewhere in the middle of all this noise, you're trying to figure out what's actually best for your child. That's why I recommend Lynn Arcuri and Elevate How You Navigate. Lynn is the father of an autistic son, host of the Autism Parenting Secrets podcast, and someone who understands firsthand how overwhelming the autism journey can be. His focus isn't on adding more noise. It's on helping parents gain clarity, confidence, and a practical path forward. Through his coaching and guidance, Lynn helps parents cut through the noise, sort through conflicting advice, and make decisions with greater confidence. The goal isn't to tell you what to think. It's to help you navigate your family's unique situation with greater certainty and purpose. Lynn offers a free strategic clarity call where you can discuss your family's challenges, explore opportunities for growth, and identify meaningful next steps. To learn more or schedule your free call, visit elevatehowyounavigate.com. Because when parents have clarity, they can navigate with confidence, and that can make all the difference in the world. First, I would like to mention MAYU water. If you're trying to upgrade your hydration, MAYU uses a vortex flow system that mimics how water naturally moves in rivers and streams. That motion helps increase oxygenation and release unwanted gases like chlorine, improving overall water quality and making it easier to stay consistently hydrated. But here's what most people overlook. Hydration isn't just about water. It's about minerals and absorption. MAYU allows you to remineralize your water with essential minerals and electrolytes, supporting cellular hydration, energy levels, and overall physiological balance. When your water has the right structure and mineral content, your body can actually use it more efficiently. If you care about hydration, performance, or just feeling better day to day, this is one of those simple upgrades that adds up. You can get 10% off with the code AUTISM. Next, Daylight Computer Company and Daylight Kids. These devices are designed to work with your brain, not against it. And honestly, the future of tech is already here. Most screens are built for stimulation, bright, fast, and attention-grabbing. But that often leads to eye strain, mental fatigue, and disrupted sleep. Daylight takes a different approach. By reducing blue light and lowering overall sensory load, these devices support sustained focus, calmer attention, and healthier sleep patterns. For anyone who feels drained after screen time, or for kids whose nervous systems are still developing, this creates a much more natural, regulated way to engage with technology. If you want your tech to support your brain instead of overstimulating it, this is worth checking out. Use code AUTISM for $50 off. And finally, Chroma light devices, lights designed for humans. Natural light contains a full spectrum that our brains and bodies are tuned to. But most modern indoor lighting falls short of that. It's often narrow, harsh, and out of sync with how we're designed to experience light. Chroma is built to bring that balance back. These lights are designed to better reflect the qualities of natural light, supporting your circadian rhythm, reducing sensory strain, and creating environments that feel calmer and more aligned. That can translate into better sleep, more stable energy, and a nervous system that isn't constantly being pushed toward overload. If you have ever felt off under certain lighting and didn't know why, This is worth exploring. Get 10% off with the code AUTISM. If you're optimizing your environment, your focus, your well-being, your nervous system, these products are worth checking out. For today's episode, with the Autism and the Structure of Reality series, we're going to talk mostly about Soren Kierkegaard. Over the last several episodes, we've explored temptation, the Beatitudes, and the idea that repetition builds character. Those ideas naturally raise a harder question. If we know what pulls us away from what matters, if we've glimpsed into a transformed way of being, if repetition truly shapes who we become, why is change so difficult? Why do we continue repeating patterns we know are harmful? Why do we stay stuck in lives we no longer want? Why do we avoid conversations, responsibilities, and truths we know matter? In the previous episode, we discussed how repetition builds character. Soren Kierkegaard might agree, but maybe immediately ask, character towards what? Repetition can build courage. Repetition can build honesty and faithfulness, but repetition can also build avoidance. Repetition can build conformity and unconsciousness. The self is always practicing becoming someone. The question is whether we are consciously choosing who that someone is. Not yet mentioned in the series is Albert Camus. He once wrote, "Man is the only creature who refuses to be what he is." Kierkegaard spent much of his life exploring that mystery. Why do human beings resist becoming themselves? Why do we avoid the very possibility we long for? What is that delta? Why do we remain trapped in versions of ourselves that no longer fit? Today we will explore those questions through the work of a philosopher who I believe is one of the most overlooked thinkers in modern life, Soren Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard lived in the 19th century, but much of what he wrote feels surprisingly modern. He looked around at a society that appeared successful, productive, educated, and sophisticated. Yet he saw something deeply troubling. Very few people seem to be becoming themselves. For Kierkegaard, the self is not something you simply find. The self is not merely something you express. The self is a task, something you must become, something you must repeatedly choose, something you must actively participate in creating. He said the self is a relation which relates itself to itself, a synthesis of the infinite and the finite, of the temporal and the eternal, of freedom and necessity. You are already a self, but you are also becoming a self. And between those two realities lies a gap, a distance, a tension, a friction, and much of human life unfolds within that space. There is the person you are, and there is the person you could become, the person you are capable of becoming, the person you know at some level you ought to become. Most of us know exactly where this gap exists. We know when we lie awake at night. We know when a conversation keeps returning to our minds. We know when we think about a responsibility we keep postponing. And we know when we imagine a better version of ourselves and immediately feel resistant. Dostoevsky beautifully once wrote, "Your worst sin is that you have destroyed and betrayed yourself for nothing." This is a difficult statement, and it hits heavy with those hard emotions, those heavy emotions like regret, because it suggests the greatest tragedy is not failure. The greatest tragedy is abandoning who you could become. The problem is rarely information. Most people already know the next step. They know the conversation. They know the apology. They know the responsibility. They know the habit they need to break. They know the truth that they have been avoiding. They know the decision that keeps returning to their mind. The problem is rarely uncertainty. The problem is that movement requires sacrifice. Kierkegaard put it this way: what I really need is to get clear about what I must do, not what I must know. The crucial thing is to find a truth, which is truth for me. And sacrifice means leaving behind the person we currently are. This is one reason change feels so difficult. We are not merely changing our circumstances. We are changing ourselves. And every meaningful transformation involves a kind of death. Remember, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. This is all an extension. This is all layers of what is being mentioned. An old pattern must die. The old story must die. The old identity must die. Something new cannot emerge while everything old remains untouched. One of the strange assumptions of modern life is that more information will solve our problems. If I just read another book, listen to another podcast, watch another video, find another so-called expert, then I will finally change. But Kierkegaard saw something that many of us still struggle to accept. Information and transformation are not the same thing. A person can spend years studying courage while remaining afraid. Taken from a Kierkegaard journal entry, he said, "What I really need is to get clear about what I must do, not what I must know. The crucial thing is to find a truth, which is truth for me, to find the idea for which I am willing to live and die." A person can study relationships while avoiding vulnerability. A person can study health while neglecting their body. A person can study spirituality while avoiding God. We live in an era where someone can consume hundreds of hours of content about health while never doing anything about it. Hundreds of hours about relationships while never having the difficult conversation. Hundreds of hours about meaning while never changing the way they live. Knowledge accumulates. Transformation never arrives, never starts. Knowledge matters, but knowledge does not automatically become action. And action does not automatically become character. Transformation requires embodiment. The truth must become lived reality. And this is where Kierkegaard becomes uncomfortable, because he asks a question many of us would rather avoid. If you know the direction you should move, why aren't you moving? Now, Kierkegaard was not naive. He understood that life is difficult. Circumstances matter. Health matters. Your resources matter. Trauma matters. But he believed there was a deeper and more universal problem. The self often resists becoming itself. This brings us to one of his most important ideas, despair. Today, we often use despair to mean sadness or hopelessness. Kierkegaard meant something much deeper. For him, despair was a misrelation within the self, a kind of internal division, a disconnect between what a person is and what they are called to become. A person can be successful and despairing, popular and despairing, productive, despairing, comfortable and despairing, because despair is not fundamentally about circumstances. Kierkegaard believed there were people living in despair who never realized it. The idea sounds strange at first. How can someone be in despair without knowing it? Because despair is not always dramatic. Sometimes it looks successful. Sometimes it looks respectable. Sometimes it looks so-called normal. Kierkegaard believed there was a form of despair that looked perfectly normal. A person wakes up, goes to work, pays the bills, follows expectations, repeats that routine, and never once asks, why am I doing this? Who am I becoming? Is this actually my life? Or is it simply the life I inherited? For Kierkegaard, the tragedy is not merely suffering. The tragedy is unconsciousness. Living an entire life without ever consciously becoming a self. Life is short. How are you occupying your time? He said the greatest hazard of all, losing oneself, can occur very quietly in the world, as if it were nothing at all. No other loss can occur so quietly. That one is in despair is not a rarity. No, it is rare, very rare, that one is not in despair. A person inherits a definition of success, inherits a career path, inherits a set of goals, inherits a set of values, and spends decades pursuing them, never stopping to ask, do I actually want this? Do I actually believe this? Do I actually value this? Or am I simply continuing a script that was handed to me? For Kierkegaard, one of the deepest forms of despair is unconsciousness. Living without truly awakening to the question of who you are becoming. Because once awareness arrives, responsibility arrives with it. And responsibility is uncomfortable. Responsibility means the future is no longer something that merely happens to us. It becomes something for which we must answer. It is about misalignment. The self is not where it ought to be. The self is disconnected from itself, and perhaps even more importantly, disconnected from the one who established it. This is the reason Kierkegaard became deeply suspicious of what he called the crowd. Earlier in this series, we discussed this idea. Kierkegaard famously wrote that the crowd is untruth. Even if every individual possessed the truth in private, yet, if they came together into a crowd, untruth would at once be in evidence. Not because groups are inherently bad, but because crowds dissolve responsibility. The crowd tells us what success looks like, what is valuable, what is desirable, what is normal. And there is comfort in that. The crowd offers relief from uncertainty, relief from responsibility, relief from having to decide. But the crowd cannot tell you who you are. The crowd cannot become you. What makes Kierkegaard feel so modern is that the crowd no longer exists, only in physical spaces. The crowd used to be your village, your workplace, your church, your neighborhood. Today, the crowd follows us everywhere. It lives in your phones. It tells us what to fear, what to desire, what to admire, what to become angry about, what success looks like, what failure looks like, what kind of person we should be. The crowd has become algorithmic. Modern systems compete for attention in ways Kierkegaard could never have imagined. The longer we remain immersed in them, the harder it becomes to distinguish between our own values and the values constantly being suggested to us. We begin to confuse popularity with truth, visibility with importance. Remember that second temptation, engagement with meaning. And because of that, it has become harder than ever to distinguish between what we genuinely value and what we have simply absorbed. Kierkegaard's challenge remains the same. Are you consciously choosing your life? Or are you merely inheriting it? That responsibility remains yours. Many systems are designed to produce competence. Some are designed to produce conformity. Few are designed to help someone become a self. Schools often evaluate whether you can operate within the rules of a system. Businesses often evaluate whether you can meet the demands of a role. Society often evaluates whether you fit expected norms. Can you fit in or not? Are you like the so-called normal people or not? Those things may be necessary, but Kierkegaard's question remains. Do you know who you are becoming while doing them? Because a person can become highly successful within a system while remaining deeply disconnected from themselves. Look around at society. It's easy to see. And sometimes people spend their entire lives becoming what is expected while never becoming themselves. Jung would later describe something similar through the idea of the persona, the socially accepted self, the adaptive self, the self that earns approval. Kierkegaard's concern is closely related. The danger is not adaptation. The danger is forgetting that adaptation is not the same thing as becoming. So why do we remain stuck? Why do we stay in the gap? Why do we avoid becoming who we could become? Dostoevsky observed something remarkably similar when he wrote, "Taking a new step, uttering a new word, is what people fear most." We often assume people fear failure, but Kierkegaard suggests something much deeper. We fear the responsibility that accompanies the possibility. Because once a new step becomes possible, remaining where we are becomes a choice, a safer choice. Part of Kierkegaard's answer appears in a section of either or, called the rotation method. Kierkegaard lived in a world with far fewer options than we do. Yet he worried that endless possibilities could become paralyzing. Today, that problem has multiplied. We can compare ourselves to thousands of people before breakfast, thousands of careers, thousands of lifestyles, thousands upon thousands of opinions, thousands of paths. At first, this feels like freedom, but eventually possibility can become its own burden, because every possibility reminds us of a path not taken. And when every option remains open, commitment becomes difficult. At some point, a self is built, not by keeping every door open. A self is built by walking through one. This may be one of the most countercultural ideas Kierkegaard offers. Modern culture often teaches us that freedom means maximizing options, keeping every possibility available, never committing too deeply, never closing any doors. But Kierkegaard saw something different. A self is not formed by endless possibilities. A self is formed through commitment. Marriage is a commitment. Friendship is a commitment. Faith is a commitment. Character is a commitment. Meaning itself often emerges through commitment. Possibility is necessary, but possibility alone does not build a life. At some point, possibility must become choice, and choice must become action, and action must become character. He said, boredom is the root of all evil, the despairing refusal to be oneself. The idea is deceptively simple. So change something. Find a distraction. Find a new source of stimulation. Find a new explanation. Find a new identity. Find a new obsession. Keep moving, because if you stop moving long enough, you may have to face yourself. Kierkegaard believed we often mistake motion for growth. We assume that because things are changing, we are changing. But a person can change jobs, cities, hobbies, relationships, beliefs, social groups, and identities while remaining fundamentally unchanged. It starts with the self. It's the beatitudes. The scenery changes, the self does not. And perhaps this is one of the defining temptations of modern life. The moment boredom appears, we reach for stimulation. The moment anxiety appears, we seek distraction. The moment uncertainty appears, we search for escape. This is the first temptation, and it's the reason why this is the first temptation. We rotate again and again, and the deeper self never receives our attention. This should sound familiar. In this last episode, we explored the idea that repetition builds character. Every repeated action trains something. Every repeated response shapes something. Every repeated habit forms something. And that includes avoidance. Every avoidance trains avoidance. Every escape trains escape. The self is always practicing becoming someone. The question is who? Perhaps the deepest insight Kierkegaard offers is that the greatest danger is not failure. The greatest danger is unconsciousness. Living automatically, following expectations automatically, accepting values automatically, pursuing goals automatically, moving from one stage of life to another without ever asking why. Kierkegaard, awakening can become painful because awareness forces choice, and choice creates responsibility. But without that awakening, a person may spend their entire life becoming someone they never consciously chose to become. Perhaps this is why so many great thinkers arrive at a similar observation. Dostoevsky's Underground Man sees the truth that refuses movement. Nietzsche repeatedly asks what a human being is capable of becoming. And Jung asks whether we are living from the self or merely from the persona. Kierkegaard asks a different question. Why do we keep running? And perhaps that question brings us to one of the strangest stories in Scripture. The story of the bronze serpent. The Israelites are suffering. Serpents are entering the camp. People are being bitten, and people are dying. They're terrified. And God tells Moses to create a bronze serpent and lift it up. Those who look upon it live. For years, I found that story strange. The older I've gotten, the more into psychology I've gotten, the more I've understood the scripture and about the self and philosophy, the more profound it becomes. Because psychologically and spirituality, the symbolism is remarkable. The thing causing the suffering becomes the thing that must be faced. Not worshipped, not celebrated, faced. Look directly at it. The bronze serpent required people to face what was killing them. The cross requires people to face what is killing them. The bronze serpent is not merely a story about healing. It is a pattern. Human beings instinctively turn away from what frightens them, wounds them, or convicts them. Yet again and again throughout Scripture, transformation begins when people stop running and start facing reality directly. Perhaps this is why Christ compares himself to the serpent lifted in the wilderness. The cross is not an invitation to escape reality. It is an invitation to encounter it fully. Kierkegaard's entire philosophy can almost be summarized this way. Look directly at what is biting you. He said to venture causes anxiety, but not to venture is to lose oneself. And to venture in the highest is precisely to be conscious of oneself. The fear, the grief, the responsibility, the truth, and that possibility. Stop rotating, stop distracting, stop escaping, and look. Because the greatest danger is not that we suffer. The greatest danger is that we never wake up. That we spend an entire life moving from one distraction to another and never ask, who am I becoming? The grief we avoid remains unfinished. The fear we avoid remains powerful. The responsibility we avoid remains unfulfilled. The truth we avoid remains hidden. The self we refuse to become remains unrealized. Avoidance preserves the old self. Encounter transforms it. This is one reason the Beatitudes are so radical. They do not offer escape. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. These are not invitations away from reality. They are invitations deeper into it. Because transformation rarely occurs through escape. Transformation occurs through encounter. And for Kierkegaard, becoming a self requires exactly this kind of courage. The courage to face reality. The courage to face responsibility. The courage to face truth. The courage to face the gap between who you are and who you could become. So perhaps the question is not simply, who are you? The deeper question is, who are you becoming? A quote commonly attributed to Kierkegaard captures the spirit of his philosophy. Face the facts of being what you are, for that is what changes what you are. What conversation are you still avoiding? What responsibility are you postponing? What truth are you refusing to face? What possibility are you refusing to pursue? What gap are you pretending does not exist? The thing you could keep escaping may be the very place where transformation begins. Perhaps despair is not merely the pain of who you are. Perhaps despair is the pain of knowing who you could become. And the self you could become may be waiting on the other side of that encounter. If you're listening to the podcast, listening to the episode, please feel free to leave a review or rating. In podcasting, reviews, ratings, and downloads are huge, and I very much appreciate your feedback. You can contact me on X at RPS47586. You can email me info.fromthespectrum@gmail.com. You can check out the YouTube page for full-length videos, shorts, and clips. Thank you for listening to From the Spectrum podcast.